Hajin stared at the human tools spread across the workshop table. Her four-fingered hands trembled as she picked up a wrench. The weight felt strange, but somehow right. Around her, the scent of oil and metal filled the air of the small repair shop, tucked away in the corner of the Raxian shipyard. She wasn't supposed to be here. Raxians didn't do mechanical work. That's what everyone said. Her people were proud of their analytical minds and mathematical skills. They were advisors, coordinators, and strategists. The actual hands-on work. That was for humans and other species who didn't mind getting dirty. But Hajin couldn't stay away. For 3 weeks now, she had watched the old human mechanic, Master Park, work on ships. She would hide behind cargo containers during her lunch break, amazed at how he could tell what was wrong with an engine just by listening to it. Today was different. Master Park had caught her watching. "You going to stand there all day, or do you want to learn something?" he had asked, not even turning around as he worked on a fuel line. His words had startled her so badly she'd knocked over a toolbox. Now, hours later, Hajin was still in his workshop. Master Park moved slowly around the room, his gray hair messy from running his hands through it while thinking. He watched as she tried to copy the way he held the wrench. "Not like that," he said kindly. "Hold it closer to the head. Gives you better control." He walked over, his old blue coveralls stained with grease. His hands were gentle as he adjusted her grip. Hajin's skin, with its light blue tint, looked strange next to his weathered human hands. "But Master Park, I don't understand. Why are you willing to teach me? Everyone knows Raxians can't do mechanical work." The old man laughed. "Can't, or won't." He picked up a broken engine part from his workbench. "Look at this. Tell me what you see." Hajin's inner eyelids blinked rapidly, a sign of concentration among her people. "The metal is stressed here and here," she said, pointing with one slender finger. "The vibration patterns would have created weakness along these points. The failure was inevitable given the resonance frequency." "Exactly." Master Park's face broke into a wide smile. "You see it. You understand the physics, the math. Now you just need to learn the hands-on part. The feel of it." "But our hands," Hajin looked down at her 4 fingers, feeling ashamed, "are different from mine." "So what?" Park shrugged. "Means you'll hold tools differently. Find your own way. That's all." He walked over to a shelf and pulled down an old manual. "Here, take this home. Study it." Hajin took the manual like it was made of gold. "I can't let anyone see me with this," she whispered. "My father, he's a senior coordinator. He would be so ashamed if he knew I was interested in mechanical work." Master Park's face grew serious. "Knowledge is never something to be ashamed of, Hajin. Neither is wanting to learn." He paused, thinking. "My granddaughter Jaya helps me here sometimes. She's about your age. Come by when she's here. Might be easier if you're not the only young one learning." Hajin carefully put the manual in her bag. Her lunch break had ended an hour ago. She would have to make up an excuse for being late back to her coordinator training. As she turned to leave, Master Park called out, "Same time tomorrow." Hajin stopped at the door. She thought about her father's face if he knew, about all the things Raxians weren't supposed to do, about how her hands had trembled with excitement when she held that wrench. "Yes," she said firmly. "Same time tomorrow." Master Park nodded, already turning back to his work. But Hajin saw his smile. As she hurried back to her post, she felt the weight of the manual in her bag. It felt like the beginning of something big, something that would change everything. She just didn't know how right she was. Solik stood in his daughter's doorway, the human mechanic's manual held tight in his 4-fingered grip. His skin had turned a dark blue, a sign of anger among Raxians. Hajin sat on her bed, her head lowered but her back straight. "Explain this," he said, his voice cold. "Why do you have a human repair manual hidden under your bed?" Hajin's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. She had been careless, After 2 months of secret lessons with Master Park, she had grown too confident. "Father, I can explain." "Do you know what people would say if they knew?" Solek cut her off. "A senior coordinator's daughter, playing with tools like a common laborer. We are Raxians. We work with our minds, not our hands." "But father, I am working with my mind." Jin stood up. "The physics, the mathematics, it's all connected." Master Park says. "Master Park." Solek's skin darkened even more. "You've been spending time with a human mechanic." From the doorway, Jin's mother Yumai appeared. She placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "Solek, perhaps we should listen." "Listen to what?" He snapped. "Our daughter is throwing away everything we've worked for. All her training, all our plans." He turned back to Jin. "You will stop this nonsense immediately. Tomorrow you will return to your full-time coordinator training. No more disappearing during lunch breaks." Jin felt tears forming in her eyes, but she held them back. "Father, please, I'm learning so much. Yesterday, I helped fix a power coupling fat." "Fixed? You touched ship equipment?" Solek's voice rose. "Do you know how dangerous that is? How much trouble you could cause? One mistake and—" "I didn't make any mistakes." Jin's voice grew stronger. "Master Park checked everything. The coupling works better now than before. I combined our mathematical models with human repair techniques. It's more efficient." Solek slammed the manual down on Jin's desk. "Enough. You are forbidden from going near that repair shop again. If I hear you've been there." He left the threat unfinished. After her father stormed out, Jin sank back onto her bed. Her mother lingered in the doorway. "Mother," Jin began. Yumei came in and closed the door quietly. She picked up the manual and sat next to her daughter. "Show me," she said softly. "What?" "Show me what you've learned. Explain it to me." With trembling hands, Jin opened the manual. She pointed to a diagram of an engine. "See here. Humans use intuition a lot when they work, but when you combine it with our mathematical understanding." She explained how she had modified traditional repair techniques using Raxian calculations. Yumai listened carefully. When Jin finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. "You truly love this, don't you?" "Yes," Jin whispered. "More than anything." Her mother stood up and walked to the door. She turned back with a small smile. "Your father leaves for work at the 8th bell. I leave at the 9th. I never check where you go between those times." Jin's eyes widened. "Mother." "And if you need to store any more manuals," Yumai continued, "the loose panel in my garden shed is very useful. Your father never goes in there." She opened the door. "Just be careful, daughter. Change comes slowly to our people, but sometimes it must come." The next morning, Jin waited until the 8th bell rang and her father left. She watched from her window as her mother left at the 9th bell, giving the garden shed a meaningful glance as she walked past. Half an hour later, Jin was back in Master Park's workshop. The old mechanic looked up as she entered. "Wasn't sure you'd come back," he said quietly. Jin picked up a wrench. Her grip was sure now, no trembling. "There's a broken power converter in Bay 12, she said. "Teach me how to fix it." Master Park smiled. "That's my girl." He grabbed his toolbox. "Just wait until you meet Jia. She's coming by today. Think you two will have a lot to talk about." Jin followed him out of the workshop. Behind them, the human repair manual sat safely hidden in her mother's garden shed, waiting for her next study session. Some things she was learning were worth breaking the rules for. The sound of laughter echoed through Master Park's workshop. Jin and Jaya sat on the floor, surrounded by engine parts and tools. A broken navigation unit lay between them, its inner workings exposed. "So you really calculated the exact angle?" Jaya asked, wiping grease from her hands onto her coveralls. Her short black hair was held back by a colorful bandana. Of course. He-Jin's inner eyelids blinked excitedly. The standard repair manual says to bend at 45 degrees, but for Raxian ships, the optimal angle is 47.3 degrees. I did the math 3 times to be sure. Jaya shook her head in amazement. That's why my fixes never lasted as long on Raxian ships. I was using human measurements. She picked up the navigation unit. Show me how you do it. For the next hour, He-Jin demonstrated her method. She combined the human technique of listening to the unit's hum with precise Raxian mathematical formulas. Jia watched closely, asking questions and taking notes in her small repair notebook. Grandfather was right about you, Jaya said as they finished. You see things differently. It's like you're building a bridge between our ways of working. Before He-Jin could respond, voices approached the workshop. Both girls froze. Through the window, they saw 2 Raxian engineers walking past. Disgraceful, one was saying. Did you hear about Solik's daughter? They say she's been seen with humans, learning their crude repair methods. How embarrassing for him, the other replied. If my daughter ever tried something like that. He-Jin's shoulders slumped as the voices faded away. Jia put a comforting hand on her arm. Hey, Jaya said softly. Don't listen to them. They don't understand what we're doing here. But what if they're right? He-Jin stared at her 4-fingered hands. Maybe I'm just embarrassing my family. Maybe I should stick to coordinator training like a proper Raxian. Jaya stood up suddenly. Come with me. I want to show you something. She led He-Jin to the back of the workshop and pulled out an old holoprojector. With a few taps, an image appeared in the air. An old photograph of a young human woman standing next to a Raxian ship. That's my grandmother, Jaya explained. She was one of the first humans to work on Raxian vessels. Everyone said she was crazy, that human hands were too clumsy for such advanced technology. Jaya smiled proudly. She proved them wrong. And you know what? Some of her techniques are still used today. I didn't know that, He-Jin said quietly. Because people forget. They forget that progress comes from trying new things, from combining different ways of thinking. Jia turned off the projector. That's what you're doing, He-Jin. And you're really good at it. Master Park's voice called from the front of the workshop. Girls, come see this. They hurried out to find him examining a newly arrived ship part. It was a complex power core, its surface covered in both human and Raxian writing. First joint design piece I've ever seen, Master Park said, his eyes twinkling. Engineers from both species worked together on this one. Times are changing, slowly but surely. He-Jin ran her fingers over the smooth metal. She could see how the design combined human practical efficiency with Raxian mathematical precision. It was beautiful. Now, Master Park said, who wants to learn how to install it? Both girls raised their hands eagerly. As they worked together, He-Jin felt her earlier doubts fading. Jia showed her human shortcuts, while He-Jin explained Raxian energy flow patterns. When they finished, the power core hummed perfectly, a harmony of both species' knowledge. We make a good team, Jaya said, offering He-Jin a fist bump, a human gesture she had taught her friend. He-Jin bumped her 4-fingered fist against Jaya's 5-fingered one. The best team. Master Park watched them with a satisfied smile. You know, he said, sometimes the best mechanics aren't the ones who know all the answers. They're the ones who aren't afraid to learn new ways of finding them. As the day ended, He-Jin walked home with her head held high. Let them talk. Let them disapprove. With every repair, every calculation, every lesson, she was proving that different ways of thinking could work together. And she was just getting started. Red warning lights flashed across the shipyard's main deck. Alarms blared through every section. He-Jin stood at her coordinator's station, watching in horror as the readings from Dock 7 turned dark red. All personnel, clear Dock 7 immediately. A voice boomed over the speakers. Emergency protocols in effect. Through the massive windows, He-Jin could see the problem. The newest Raxian ship, the Star Weaver, was shaking in its berth. Blue energy sparked around its engines in a way she had never seen before. "What's happening?" someone shouted. "The power core is overloading," called out Senior Engineer Tajin. "The feedback loop is out of control." Heijin's inner eyelids fluttered rapidly as she looked at the readings. Something wasn't right. The patterns were familiar, but wrong. She had seen something like this before, in Master Park's workshop. 6 Raxian engineers rushed to the dock's control station. They began typing frantically, trying to solve the problem with standard Raxian protocols. Nothing worked. The shaking got worse. "If we can't stop it, we'll lose the whole ship," Tajin said, his skin turning pale blue with fear. "Maybe the whole dock." Heijin's hands trembled above her coordinator's panel. She knew what was wrong. It was the same problem she and Jia had fixed last week, but much bigger. The new power core, the joint human-Raxian design, was being controlled by pure Raxian methods. It needed both approaches to work properly. "We need to shut it down," someone said. "Flood the dock with coolant." "No," Heijin shouted before she could stop herself. Everyone turned to look at her. Senior Engineer Tajin frowned. "Coordinator Heijin, return to your station. This is an engineering problem." Heijin took a deep breath. "Sir, flooding the dock will destroy the core. The coolant will react with the human components." "And how would you know that?" another engineer asked suspiciously. The ship shuddered again. Warning signals showed the power levels climbing higher. They had minutes, maybe less. Heijin looked around the room. She saw doubt, fear, and suspicion on every face. If she admitted how she knew, she would reveal her secret training with Master Park. Her father would find out. Her career as a coordinator would be over. The ship groaned. A window cracked. "Because," Heijin said clearly, "I've worked with these cores before. The human parts need a different approach. Please, let me help." Tajin stared at her. The ship shook again, harder this time. A decision had to be made. "If you're wrong," he said, "we lose everything. If we do nothing, we lose everything anyway." Heijin replied. Tajin looked at the warnings, then at the ship, then back at Heijin. "Do it," he said quietly. Heijin ran to the engineering station. Her four-fingered hands flew over the controls, combining Raxian commands with human mechanical principles that Master Park had taught her. She could hear Jaya's voice in her head. "Listen to the engine. Feel its rhythm." The ship's shaking slowly began to change. The blue sparks shifted color. "It's not working fast enough," someone said. "Give her time," Tajin ordered. Heijin blocked out everything except the problem in front of her. She remembered what Jia had said about harmony between systems. With trembling fingers, she entered one final sequence, a combination of human and Raxian code she and Jia had created together. The ship gave one last shudder. Then, slowly, the blue sparks faded. The warning lights turned green one by one. In the sudden silence, Heijin could hear people starting to breathe again. "How did you do that?" Tajin asked, staring at her station. Before Heijin could answer, a new voice spoke from the doorway. "Yes, daughter. How exactly did you do that?" Heijin turned. Her father stood there, his skin dark blue with anger. Behind him, she saw Master Park and Jia, who must have come running when they heard the alarms. The room was silent. Heijin straightened her back and looked her father in the eye. The time for hiding was over. The conference room was silent except for the soft hum of air filters. Heijin stood at one end, facing a table of senior engineers and coordinators. Her father sat among them, his skin still dark blue with anger. "Explain yourself," Senior Engineer Tajin said. "How did you know how to stop the power core overload?" Heijin glanced at Master Park and Jia, who stood by the door. Master Park gave her a small nod. "I've been studying ship mechanics," Heijin said clearly. "For the past 3 months, I've been learning from Master Park during my free time. Murmurs filled the room. One engineer stood up. Learning human mechanics. That's against all our traditions. The traditions that almost lost us a ship today. Jaya spoke up from the door. Several Raxians turned to glare at her. Jaya, Master Park warned quietly. Tajin took a deep breath. May I show you something? Tajin nodded. Hejin walked to the room's display screen and plugged in a data chip. Diagrams appeared, her own drawings combining human repair techniques with Raxian mathematical formulas. The new power cores are joint projects, she explained. They need both human and Raxian understanding to work properly. Today's problem happened because we were trying to control human components with only Raxian methods. She showed them the error readings. See these patterns? They're like a human heartbeat, not a Raxian energy wave. The core wasn't broken. It was working exactly as the human engineers designed their part to work. But our systems didn't understand that. So you used human repair methods? Her father asked, his voice cold. No, the Jinn said. I used both. The solution had to combine human mechanical insight with Raxian mathematical precision. She brought up her final code sequence. This is what saved the ship. Jia and I developed it together. The room was quiet as the engineers studied her work. Jin could see confusion and surprise on their faces as they began to understand. This is... Ta Jin leaned forward. This is remarkable. The efficiency ratings are better than our standard protocols. Impossible, another engineer said. A student couldn't create better protocols than our experts. Not alone, Jin agreed, but by learning from both species, by combining our different ways of thinking. Yes, we can do better. She touched the screen, bringing up more examples. Every time Jaya and I work together, we find better solutions. Humans understand things through touch and sound and intuition. We understand through mathematics and patterns. Together, we're stronger. This is why the joint projects are so important. Master Park spoke up. Both species have something to teach each other. Solik stood up suddenly. Everyone turned to look at Heijin's father. My daughter, he said slowly, has broken our traditions. She has gone against her training as a coordinator. He paused. And today, she saved our most expensive ship and possibly the entire dock. The room was completely silent. Solik's skin had begun to return to its normal color. Perhaps, he continued, it is time for some of our traditions to change. Hejin felt tears in her eyes. Father, I'm not happy about how you did this, he said, but I cannot argue with the results. He turned to Tajin. The question is, what do we do now? Tajin looked at Heijin's diagrams again. These protocols should be tested properly, documented. If they work as well as they did today. He stood up. Hejin, would you be willing to work with a team to develop these ideas further? Yes, Hejin said quickly, but I have two conditions. Conditions? Someone asked in surprise. First, Jaya needs to be part of the team. We work best together. Hejin looked at her friend, who smiled. Second, we need to train others, both humans and Raxians, in these combined methods. No more separation between species. The room erupted in discussion. Hejin waited, standing tall. Finally, Tajin raised his hand for quiet. After today, he said, I don't think we can afford to ignore new ideas, even if they break tradition. He looked around the room. All in favor. One by one, hands raised, even her father's. Hejin felt Master Park's hand on her shoulder. Well done, he whispered. This is just the beginning. Looking at the raised hands, at Jaya's proud smile, at her father's slowly accepting face, Hejin knew he was right. Everything was about to change. 2 weeks had passed since the power core incident. Hejin walked through the shipyard's main corridor, noticing how heads turned as she passed. Some looked at her with respect, others with uncertainty. But it was the young Raxians who interested her most. They watched her with hope in their eyes. Jin, wait up. Jia jogged to catch up with her. You need to see this. They walked to the training area where they had set up their first official class in combined mechanics. Instead of the 5 or 6 students they expected, the room was packed. Young Raxians sat next to human apprentices, all of them eagerly waiting. There must be 30 people here, Jin whispered. Word is spreading, Jaya replied with a grin. After you saved the Star Weaver, everyone's talking about your methods. Before Jin could respond, a loud voice cut through the room. This is unacceptable. Elder Daho, head of the Raxian Engineering Guild, stormed in. His skin was the darkest blue Jin had ever seen. Behind him came 2 other guild members, carrying traditional Raxian engineering texts. What do you think you're doing? Elder Daho demanded. Jin stepped forward. Teaching, Elder. These students want to learn both human and Raxian methods. These methods have served us for 1,000 years. He held up one of the ancient texts. Our ways are pure, tested, proven. And they failed 2 weeks ago, Jaya said quietly, when Jin's combined approach saved the ship. Elder Daho turned to the students. You, young ones, why do you dishonor our traditions? Why do you sit here learning human tricks? A young Raxian female stood up. Because we want to be better, Elder. We want to understand both ways. Both ways. Elder Daho laughed harshly. Next you'll want to learn cooking from the humans too, or their primitive music. What's wrong with that? Everyone turned. Solik, Jin's father, stood in the doorway. His skin was its normal calm blue. Senior Coordinator Solik, Elder Daho said stiffly, surely you don't support this corruption of our youth. Solik walked into the room slowly. 2 weeks ago, I would have agreed with you, but then I watched my daughter save a ship worth more than this entire academy. He looked at Jin proudly. She did it by combining our knowledge with human wisdom. Wisdom, Elder Daho sputtered. They're mechanics, workers. They're our partners, Jin said firmly. And their different way of thinking makes us stronger together. She walked to the front of the room. Watch this. She activated the room's display screen, showing the power readings from the Star Weaver. These are from before we applied the new combined protocols. She swiped to a new screen. And these are from after. The efficiency is 30% better. The students murmured in excitement. Even Elder Daho's guild members leaned forward with interest. Numbers don't lie, Elder, Solik said softly. And these numbers say we can do better by working together. This is just the beginning, Jaya added. Every day we find new ways to improve things. Human intuition plus Raxian precision. It's like discovering a whole new science. Elder Daho looked around the room. He saw the eager faces of the students, the proud stance of Solik, the determined expressions of Jin and Jia. His skin slowly began to lighten. You really think you can improve on 1,000 years of tradition? He asked. Jin. No, Elder, Jin replied. I think we can build on it. Take what's best from both worlds and make something better. She held out one of the training manuals she and Jia had written together. Would you like to see how? The room was silent as Elder Daho stared at the manual. Finally, he reached out and took it. The guild will want to review all of this, he said stiffly. Properly. Thoroughly. Of course, Jin agreed. We welcome their input. As Elder Daho and his members left, the students burst into excited conversation. Jia bumped Jin's shoulder. That went better than expected, she whispered. Jin watched Elder Daho walking away, already opening the manual. Change comes slowly, she said, remembering her mother's words. But it does come. Speaking of change, Jaya grinned. Wait until they see what we're planning for the advanced class. Jin looked at the room full of eager students, humans and Raxians together, ready to learn, ready to grow. Maybe some traditions were meant to change. The main assembly hall of the shipyard was packed. Humans and Raxians filled every seat, with more standing along the walls. News cameras floated near the ceiling, broadcasting the event across both human and Raxian networks. Hejin stood on one side of the large stage, trying to keep her skin its normal blue shade. Jia stood next to her, adjusting tools on their workbench. "Ready?" Jia whispered. "No," Hejin admitted, "but we don't have a choice." On the other side of the stage, Elder Daeho prepared his own workstation. After reviewing Hejin's methods for a month, he had issued a public challenge, a contest between traditional Raxian engineering and Hejin's combined approach. "The challenge is simple," the announcer said. "Both teams will repair identical ship engines. The one that achieves the highest efficiency rating wins." Hejin looked into the audience. She saw her father and mother sitting together. Behind them sat Master Park, his weathered face serious. In the front row, many of her students watched nervously. "The winning method," Elder Daeho announced, "will become the new standard for all joint human Raxian projects." The crowd murmured. This was bigger than Hejin had expected. The future of both species' cooperation would depend on today's outcome. "Begin," the announcer called. Elder Daeho moved with practiced grace, his four-fingered hands flying over his engine. He used pure Raxian techniques, the same ones that had served their people for centuries. Hejin and Jia worked together. They had practiced this dozens of times, but never with so much at stake. Jaya's human hands handled the physical adjustments, while Hejin calculated the precise measurements they needed. "Power reading at 60%, the announcer said after 10 minutes. Hejin wiped sweat from her forehead. She could hear Elder Daeho's engine humming, a pure, traditional Raxian tone. Their engine made a different sound, a harmony of human and Raxian engineering. "Look," Jaya whispered, pointing at their readings. The efficiency was climbing faster than they'd expected. But something wasn't right. Hejin's inner eyelids flickered as she studied the patterns. "Wait," she said. "Stop." Jaya froze. "What's wrong?" Hejin looked at their engine, then at Elder Daeho's. His was running perfectly by traditional standards. But she saw something in the energy patterns that worried her. "The resonance," she said. "It's building too fast." "But we're winning," Jaya protested. Hejin shook her head. "If we keep going like this, both engines will overload in about 3 minutes." "What? How?" "The new cores affect each other. Like," Hejin searched for a simple way to explain it, "like singers whose voices shake a glass until it breaks." She looked across at Elder Daeho. He was focused on his work, unaware of the danger. If she said nothing, his engine would fail first. She would win the challenge. "Hejin," Jaya asked quietly, "what do we do?" Hejin straightened up. "The right thing." She stepped forward. "Elder Daeho, we need to stop." The old Raxian didn't look up. "Trying to delay your defeat?" "No, sir. The resonance patterns are dangerous. Both engines are affecting each other." Now he did look up, his inner eyelids flickering as he checked his readings. "She's right," Jaya added. "The energy signatures are amplifying each other." The audience watched in confusion as Hejin walked to the center of the stage. "Elder, please, let me show you." After a long moment, Elder Daeho joined her. Hejin pointed out the pattern she had noticed. The old engineer's eyes widened as he understood. "If we work together," Hejin said, "we can safely shut them down. But we have to use both methods." Elder Daeho looked at his engine, then at hers. The humming was getting louder. "Show me," he said. Together, they worked on both engines. Hejin guided his hands through the human techniques while he helped her refine the Raxian calculations. The dangerous resonance faded away. When they finished, the hall was silent. Then Master Park started clapping. Others joined in until the whole room was applauding. "You could have let my engine fail," Elder Daeho said quietly. You would have won. No, He-Jin replied. We would all have lost. She smiled. The whole point is that we're stronger together. Elder Daeho's skin shifted to a thoughtful shade of blue. Perhaps, he said slowly, it is time for the guild to consider some new ideas. He-Jin looked at Jaya, who was grinning widely. Sometimes, she thought, the best victory wasn't winning. It was showing others a better way forward. 1 month after the public challenge, He-Jin stood in the largest repair bay of the shipyard. Around her, mixed teams of humans and Raxians worked together on various ships. The sound of tools mixed with voices speaking both languages. Hard to believe this is the same shipyard, Jaya said, walking up beside her. Remember when humans and Raxians wouldn't even share tools? He-Jin smiled, watching a young Raxian engineer teach a human apprentice how to calculate energy patterns. Nearby, a human mechanic showed 2 Raxian students how to feel engine vibrations to spot problems. Elder Daeho wants to see us, Jaya continued. He's in the guild chamber. He-Jin's inner eyelids flickered with surprise. The guild chamber was traditionally off-limits to humans. They found the elder sitting at the head of a long table covered in both traditional Raxian texts and new technical manuals. Ah, good, he said as they entered. Come, sit. We have much to discuss. He-Jin and Jaya sat down carefully. The walls of the chamber were lined with images of great Raxian engineers from history. Their eyes seemed to watch the human visitor with curiosity. The guild has been testing your combined methods, Elder Daeho began. The results are impressive. He pushed forward a data pad showing efficiency ratings. Every test shows significant improvements over traditional approaches. Thank you, Elder, He-Jin said carefully. But he held up one 4-fingered hand. This creates a problem. Our teaching methods, our textbooks, our entire system of training. It all needs to change. Jaya leaned forward. We can help with that. We've been developing new training materials that combine both approaches. Yes, I know. Elder Daeho's skin turned a lighter shade of blue, a sign of amusement. Your students' results speak for themselves, which is why the guild has made a decision. He pressed a button, and a large screen lit up showing a new building design. We're going to build a proper school. The first ever joint engineering academy. He-Jin's mouth fell open. A whole school. Times are changing, Elder Daeho said. Thanks to you two, we now understand that neither species has all the answers. But together, he gestured at the efficiency readings, together we can do amazing things. Who will teach at this academy? Jaya asked. Well, the elder's skin rippled with more amusement. We were hoping you two would help us design the curriculum, and perhaps serve as the first instructors. He-Jin felt tears in her eyes. All her life, she had been told to stay in her place, to follow tradition. Now the head of the guild himself was asking her to help create something completely new. A knock at the door interrupted them. He-Jin's father Solik entered, carrying more data pads. Ah, Solik, Elder Daeho said. Perfect timing. Have you shown your daughter the application numbers? Solik's skin glowed with pride as he handed He-Jin one of the pads. Over 300 applications already. Both humans and Raxians, all wanting to learn the combined approach. He-Jin stared at the numbers. This many, already. The word is spreading to other shipyards, her father explained. Everyone wants to learn what you two have created. He sat down next to her. I was wrong, daughter. So wrong to try to keep you away from this. Father, He-Jin began, but he continued. You haven't just improved our engineering. You've shown us a better way forward. Together. He looked at Jaya. Both of you have. Elder Daeho cleared his throat. Yes, well, there's still much work to be done. Curricula to design, teachers to train, facilities to build. When do we start? Jaya asked eagerly. The elder's skin rippled with more amusement. You already have. Every student you've taught, Every procedure you've improved, every barrier you've broken down, it's all been leading to this. Jen looked around the ancient chamber, at the faces of past engineers watching them. She wondered what they would think of these changes. Then she looked at Jaya's excited face, her father's proud smile, and Elder Daho's accepting nod. Together, she said softly, remembering that first day in Master Park's workshop. We're stronger together. Outside the chamber, the sounds of humans and Raxians working in harmony drifted up from the shipyard. It was the sound of the future, and it was beautiful. John looked at the strange object in his hands. It was a small metal box with buttons and dials. He had never seen anything like it before. John's friend Sarah came over and asked what he had. John showed her the box. I found this in the park, he said. I don't know what it is. Sarah looked at it closely. She pushed one of the buttons. Suddenly, the box started beeping and flashing lights. John and Sarah were surprised. They did not expect that to happen. Maybe we should not play with this, said Sarah nervously. It could be dangerous. We don't know what it does. But John was curious. He wanted to know what the box was and how it worked. He started turning the dials and pushing more buttons. The beeping got louder. Smoke began coming out of the box. Stop, yelled Sarah. She grabbed the box from John's hands and threw it on the ground. Right after she did that, the box made a loud popping sound. More smoke poured out of it. John and Sarah stared at the destroyed device. They realized they probably should have left it alone. Now they would never know what the mysterious object was or what it was meant to do. This mysterious scene leaves the reader with many questions. What was in the box? Where did it come from? The characters' curiosity got the better of them, leading to the destruction of the strange device. This hooks the reader and builds suspense. I used simple vocabulary and grammar to convey the key story points while keeping the language at a basic reading level. Describing the scene from a third-person point of view allows the author to provide details the characters themselves may not know. Let me know if you would like me to continue with part 10 of the story. I'm happy to keep the engaging tale going using accessible language.